the Hunger Games, the game makers are in control of the arenas, they're in control of manipulating the environment, designing it and controlling it as well. They're part of the capital's system of control over the districts and over the citizens. The books and movies don't go into too much detail about the inner workings of the game makers, but there are definitely a few secrets that are worth noting. So let's look into that, starting with arena design. So firstly, we can talk about manipulating the environment. So they obviously designed the arena to be a dangerous place. It's unpredictable. You have volcanoes, you have pits, you have mud, and each game obviously is different. Each arena is changed per game. So like I said, they're unpredictable because you don't know what's going to happen in the arena. You can't go into it as a tribute thinking, well, this is how I'm going to play it, because you just don't know what you're going to face. Let's look at Catching Fire as an example of how unpredictable it can be. For instance, the arena is broken up into 12 segments, so we know that it's, well, we obviously find out it's like a clock, and then they realise that each hour something different will appear. But each sector is designed to cause chaos. It's designed to put the tributes under extreme stress and to potentially get them running around and into the path of another victor or tribute. And it also forces them to constantly adapt to the environment as well. Because there's changing threats, they need to be able to think on their feet. And we do know that sometimes they'll run from one area into the path of another, where maybe it'll have fog or it'll have apes, and you just don't know how that's going to pan out for you. Next, we can look at controlled interventions. So we have sponsor gifts. So for those of you who aren't familiar, what the tributes would do is they would try to become liked, so that sponsors would send them things such as medicines, foods, waters, stuff that they actually could really do with to help them survive within the arena. So the game makers are tasked with making their games thrilling for the capital audience. They want them to be engaged, they want them to root for someone, and they want to make sure that they're watching high stake action as well as dramatic moments. They monitor the tribute's progress through cameras and sensors, and the games are broadcast live, with the game makers often creating events to keep viewers engaged. Now, we do know, if you've read Sunset on the Reaping, spoiler alert here, that at that point there were a few things that were edited to make it more, I'm not quite sure the right word, I don't want to say entertaining, but to change the narrative to the way that the capital wanted it to be seen, as opposed to the actual truth. So again, a kind of another intervention the game makers would have. But as well, the game makers would prod the tribute, so they manipulate the tribute's fates by creating situations that would force them into conflict or confrontations. For instance, sending in wild animals, food shortages, tension, competition. One example is when two people in the first book film would be able to win if they're on the same team. That then kind of changed the stakes, got Katniss and Peter to be the last two, and then they changed the rules again. So again, they were trying to cause chaos and tension and just mess, let's be honest. So we have to talk about the capital's entertainment out of this, because the games aren't just a test of survival, they're designed to be entertainment. The task that the game makers have is to make the games thrilling for the capital audience, making sure, like I said, they're watching high stakes action, dramatic things occurring. They monitor the tribute's progress through cameras and sensors. You know that they have those trackers on them as well, and they can control the timing of deaths as well to maximise the impacts. Now, as I've said, they're often broadcast live, and events are created to keep viewers engaged. Now, I know that they are also shown in the district, but I think they're shown in the district more as a form of torture, to say, you know, you're going to watch this person that you've watched grow up die, or your loved one die, whereas for the capital it's very much like betting would take place, and as we've seen, sponsors and stuff like that, it's basically their kind of horse racing is the Hunger Games, is the way that I see it. So the Mockingjay signal, we have to obviously talk about this. So in catching fire, Katniss realises that the arena is not just a place of actual danger, but also a symbol of rebellion. So during the games, Katniss becomes a signal of hope and defiance for the districts and the Gamemakers, and orders from President Snow have to suppress this rebellious spark. But the Gamemakers are then caught up in the complexity of the manipulation, because Katniss then uses the arena and its secrets to basically defy the Capitol. She realises that there is that wall, which is the edge of the arena. She realised with electricity she could bring it down. So although it's not really a game maker secret, they were definitely involved with trying to stop her from rebelling as much as they could. I mean, when you think about it now, of course, it would be obvious that they would try and stop that. But I think the first time I read it and I watched it, I didn't really take that in. But of course, would you really want your audience to know that one of the tributes is about to rebel? Probably not. So again, a secret of sorts. So moving on to the manipulation of tributes and alliances. So the Gamemakers could manipulate alliances and rivalries between tributes by creating obstacles that push them into fighting each other. For instance, like I've already said, they're forced to fight each other for survival because they believe it's only one person that can be a tribute, or be a victor, sorry. But then they change the rules to say that one district could win if both people got to the end. So when they then are told, actually, we've changed our mind, don't do that anymore, and Katniss and Peter are like, well, we just eat these berries, it's fine. The Gamemakers then changed tact and said, no, you both win, and this broke the Capitol's protocol, and it sparked a rebellion. So again, manipulation is something that is a tactic more than a secret, I would say, but definitely something to be mentioned here. In some ways as well, the Gamemakers can control the flow of time and space in the arena, so they can speed up time or slow it down by making changes to the arena in terms of danger. Essentially, they will dictate when they're safe and when they're in danger. But they can also create mock battles, so designed to provoke tributes or interfere with plans, keeping the games unpredictable. Some examples, which I guess you can call a mock battle or chaos anyway. How they control what is happening and the dangers is with those mockingjays where Katniss hears Prim's voice, but actually it's not them, but she thinks she can hear them. It's things like that where they will noticeably force someone to a certain area because they want to put them in a state of danger. Now, the Gamemakers aren't just performing for Capitol enjoyment. They obviously have a lot of pressure from President Snow, so there is some behind the scenes politics here. They have to ensure the games go off without a hitch, maintaining the appearance of a well-run spectacle, i.e. nothing went wrong, everything went to plan. Everything that happened was designed to happen. Any rebellion or disruption could end in punishment for those Gamemakers, aka Seneca Crane, just as an example. But also, if something does go wrong, then the Capitol also has to change gear, and they have to rewrite the narrative into something that they can spin as a good thing. It's not a reflection on the Capitol, it's not rebellion, i.e. Katniss and Peter's love story was born out of this. This is something Capitol cooked up because of the way the end of the first games, or the 74th Hunger Games should we say, ended. This was something that they cooked up in order to spin the narrative the way that worked for them. Of course, we have the technological mastery as well to look at here, because they have access to advanced technology that can do things like alter terrain, create disasters, and monitor every single tribute, as well as create absolute monstrosities of animals that just change through every game. Now, my favourite version of the Mutts is in Sunset on the Reaping, because I just think it was such a great idea it was, I don't want to give too much away because I think I still talked about it in another video, but the manipulation and the way that these mutts are programmed was like nothing else in the other books, and you could just imagine the horrors. It was just fantastic. So the technology does extend beyond things like the mutts and the surveillance cameras, but to things like fires, floods, volcanoes erupting as well. You have as well to look at things like in catching fire, you have that force field, which is obviously a piece of technology. We've mentioned it already today, but that will obviously try and kill them if they escape. That is obviously how Katniss rebels. That's the kind of the whole premise of that. But again, it's another bit of technology that the capital have the money and the resources to do and to use, and that is where another example of the control and manipulation that the capital and game makers have. So lastly, let's look at the end of Mockingjay, where Katniss participates in an arena that is very different from the usual games. It's part of a larger rebel plan to overthrow the capital. The game makers in this arena are not part of the capital structure, but instead helping the rebels design a trap for the capital. This final manipulation does actually show that the game makers can be used for other purposes, and their role is one of control, whether it's going to be for the capital or for a new government. They can be used, and they can probably be brought as well. But you know, you look at the game makers who actually helped get Katniss to safety because they believed that she was the future. They weren't designing the capital arena, they were designing the district's arena. But in essence, the game makers are crucial to the power structure in Panem. They're the ones who shape the games, ensure the capital's dominance remains, and they keep the districts in line whilst creating entertainment for the capital. They're able to manipulate not only the tributes but the very world in which is one of the key elements of the game's horrors. And that's it, guys. That is a look at some of the game makers' secrets that are around in the Hunger Games. Let me know what you think, if you have any other examples of times that the game makers could use technology to manipulate the environment or to manipulate the tributes as well. Don't forget to subscribe, guys, and until next time, you take care.